Welcome to my cellar. Number of things to go over in this episode. I actually am taping this on Thanksgiving night. Now, the reason I'm still awake and not sleeping off the tryptophan and don't look like we don't have ours. Cheryl and I have our Thanksgiving for the family, the other 11 of the family. We're going to do it on Saturday. When you get so many families involved, we're cool with whatever day we do it. They can, their families can do it on the traditional day, whatever. So I won't be all bedraggled and baggy-eyed until actually Saturday evening, when you will all see this on Saturday morning. So let's get rolling here. I'd love to see those dice bag prototypes you made. Well, I'll tell you what, I've got them around here. In my basement, it's kind of like, my corner of the basement, my half of the basement. It's like stuff comes to the surface every now and again. And where I'm looking for something else and I find something. So this is now on my list of when I see them, grab them. A couple of them were really nice, high-quality velvet. And they had semi-precious stones, polished stones on the end of the drawstrings. They were really quite nice. Oh, and hey, dice bags are dice bags. Whatever you find, whatever you use. I used to use a really nice tanned leather one. I've had others. Right now I'm using one that is a gift from a friend's wife that she made it for me. And, I'll use it, and then somebody else will give me one, or I'll see one somewhere, and that'll be my dice bag. I probably got a bunch of them by now if they all came to the surface at one time and I counted them. All right. In regard to Jack Vance, I highly recommend reading him, not just to get the tie-in between D&D magic and its origins, but because one will experience an explosion in new vocabulary. And boy, is that a fact. Jack Vance's writings will very likely have you looking up a few words here and there. And I always thought that was a good thing to learn new words. In fact, Gary and I used to make sure there was a couple in everything we did that we knew people would have to go look up because we figured we were doing them a favor by broadening their vocabularies. Jack Vance's vocabulary is stellar. If I heard correctly, you were the one who pushed for psionics in the player's handbook. While I disallow psionics in my 1E campaign, characters who roll really well can break the game at a low level if they get good psionic powers, as I witnessed 43 years ago with my first group in high school. Yes, I know, and that's the abuse. I was curious, why did you add a psionic class? I didn't. Okay, I did not add that as a class. I'll continue. The 2E Psionics Handbook did a good job of making the class, and I've used it in a few campaigns over the decades. But until its release, psionics were a thorn in my side as my players yearned for that power. Okay. I've told the story before, and I'm glad to tell it again. I lobbied for psionics because in the game, when I started playing it, in the late summer, early fall of 74, there was the Mind Flayer, which had come out in one of the strategic reviews, around in that period of time. There were Thought Eaters and Brain Moles and some other things that preyed upon the adventurers' minds, literally destroying the biochemistry or electrical currents or whatever of their minds. And that was a That's a horrible thing to either have all your intelligence drained out or to have any one of your 6 attributes attacked like that with no defense was a horrible thing. The mind flayers, believe it or not, in 74, 75, the absolute scariest thing in the game was the mind flayer. All right? You could run away from a beholder, but if you got close enough to a mind flayer, they just screwed up your mind, screwed up your stats, and all of a sudden you're too dumb to be whatever you were before you got into one. And I told Gary that was just intrinsically unfair. That every bad had to have a possible counter. Didn't have to be blatant, and so he said, okay, run with it. And I did. And well, it was more of a stumbling run. But I came up with a psionics system that was supposed to be only applied to an NPC or the very extremely 1 in a million player character that might have that little spark that could then be trained up. And of course, the players, that big horde, that faceless mob of players, completely screwed it over. Misused it, abused it, and now everybody and their brothers got psionic this, psionic that. Well, that wasn't what it was meant to be. It was only meant to be, for instance, and this is a conversation that Gary and I actually had. If you knew of a psionic adept, they would be handy to go hire when you knew you had to go confront some of these things. And in the early years of the game, hiring specialists was a big deal, commonly done. So now you go get this psionicist adept who's, whatever, weird, spooky, strange, whatever, and you get him to help you deal with these thought eaters or mind flayers or brain moles or whatever you had run into and wisely run away from. You go back, you get specialized help. I can understand why all those years ago they ruined your campaign. I understand. I did not make them into a class. I was long gone before that abomination occurred. They were never meant to be a class. They were meant to be an exceedingly rare power that somebody might possess and therefore give them a defense, even though it might not be a fair defense or an equal defense, some sort of defense against what mind flayers and their ilk were going to do to you. Yeah, I understand it being a thorn in your side. I understand. I wouldn't allow it if I was running an ongoing campaign right now. I probably just wouldn't screw around with mind flayers, and then there wouldn't be any need. That's the easiest way to deal with something you don't want to deal with. Don't need it. Don't do anything that would require you to need it. All right. Now I think I know where this is coming from. Sorry I missed the conversation. For what it's worth, it isn't old school, but the expanding dice pool mechanic is part of the Year Zero engine, the company system of Free League Publishing, adapted for each game world and featured in Tales from the Loop and Alien RPG. There may be other systems too with which I'm unfamiliar. It works very well for the stress mechanic that characterizes scenarios in the Alien universe. The worse things get, the more dice you add. This simulates performance under pressure while simultaneously adding to the possibility of cracking under it, which can be catastrophic, at least for the character who blows a roll. It's out of place for D&D, but it can be an awful lot of fun, especially for dice hounds who just love to hear the clatter. The more the merrier. It really all depends on how the system was designed and on what the players were comfortable with. Now, there's a response down later on this. The other problem is 10d6 is going to give you 35 most of the time. That's correct. That is, the 3.5 is the average number rolled on a d6. And if you roll enough d6s, that's what you're going to get 10 times. If you roll those 10 times, your mean, your average is going to fall in there. Without going to the mathiness of it all, the more dice you roll, the flatter the curve. D20 might be kind of swingy. 2d6 and 2d10 work really well for still giving some curve in the middle, but still giving you some 2s and 12s, or 2s and 20s. I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve, however. Okay, yeah, it's a good point. The more dice you roll, the flatter the response you'll get. The more predictable the response you'll get. It's kind of the way many designers, myself included, develop the bad guys, the other side. We develop them to all right, first we sketch out what level is this party intended to. 5 to 7, we'll say, okay, what's 5 to 7 likely to be able to do offensively and defensively? Then, from that knowledge, we then go to see the bad guys. And do we give the bad guys do we give them 2d6, 1d12, 3d4? Okay, that's going to predict a different response each time. And that's a way of balancing encounters. Is what is your expected damage roll? What is their expected damage roll? If you're going to give a player or character group of, say, 6 that can, we'll say that on an average roll, the 5 of them wielding weapons will average 58 points a round. You can see the problem if they put them up against 4 things that are going to average 87 points a round, or 86. You know, it's got to be even. So for me, that's a very important design tool and a means of establishing balance and making sure that the player characters have a chance. The average of the dice. Let's see, let's go on. Have I ever heard of exploding dice? It means you roll the max on your dice. It means if you roll the max on your dice damage rolls, allow a reroll. If your damage is d6 and you roll a 6, then you reroll and add that to the damage too. Okay, I see where you're going with that. And that's fine if you allow the monsters to do it too. If they max out on their dice, they get to add some more dice to you. See, it can't just be about you killing them. Not if you're going to make it fair. Let's see, let's go on here. Did D&D play around with this wacky rules or any other that didn't make it into the game? Not to my knowledge. That carefully described procedure that I gave just on the last question about designing, this would just throw it all out the window and make it useless. I don't think I'd like that. No, we don't, there's nothing like that I'm aware of. Now, I wasn't there when the first stones were chiseled. That's Dave and Gqry. I was there shortly after, sweeping up the chips and resharpening the chisels. Let's see. Were you involved in any kind of the level 0 adventures? Well, yeah. Every time we started a new character, we were starting from scratch. We didn't do funnels. All right, that wasn't the nature of how we played back then. And I'm not criticizing the funnels. That can be a blast. You're taking a stack of player characters you have no emotional investment in, and just forging ahead and seeing who's alive at the end. Great fun, and no angst when somebody dies. Well, you might have liked his name, but he's dead now. It is fun to do with weak characters, but then only if the DM is running a relatively weak adventure. You can't run a funnel of O levels and have everything they come up against between 3 and 5 levels higher than them. That's no longer any fun. That's just a bloodbath. Allows players to just do a lot of fun stuff with super weak characters. Kind of bond with that weak ass 2 hit point farmer who survived with a rake and a chicken with the help of his companion. I mean, I could do those kind of one-offs forever. Just who survives and how did it happen? That's plenty fun for me. I don't have to run a continuing story like a soap opera, but I understand doing it, and I have. Oh yeah, with the help of his companions, and before they all went off to wizard school or fighters guild. I noticed that there were some D&D 0 level adventures, but I didn't catch them at the time. And mid-80s, I was away with Uncle Sam. I'm not aware of 0 level adventures by TSR. That's nothing we did while I was there. And I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything they did. I do know that a lot of what they did was crap. Let's see. I have a reasonable amount of dice, but unfortunately I don't have a dice bag. I don't play enough to warrant one. What do you keep them in? A bowl? A cup? A mug? In a pile on the corner of your desk? Dice deserve to have a home. Whether you got 6 or 46 or 106, they need a home. They need a place of respite where they can breed friendly dice lice to your benefit. Your opinion may vary. Your mileage may vary. I have one purple Crown Royal bag that is almost full. I have a green Crown Royal bag that will be the next bag I start filling, and a blue. I need a new peach. I had one, but the kid took it for her dice. Well, I've not seen the peach one. I've got a brown one, and I got a Dallas Cowboy one, and I got another strange one that I picked up somewhere along the way. Or it was given to me, more likely. When Gqry passed away, why were all his writings locked away? I know Troll Lords lost the right to publish them at the time. I see that they now are releasing them, thankfully. Okay. I'm going to give you my opinion of what happened. Opinions can't be sued. When Gqry died, the widow made one of the dumbest mistakes possible in that type of circumstance. Let me be morbid for a minute. When a painter dies, his stuff goes up. Happens all the time. Goes up because he's not going to be around to make any more paintings. The widow, upon Gqry's demise, immediately commanded that all stock be returned to her. all rights revert to her. And it's my opinion that the trolls, having known the widow before she became a widow, really just didn't want to screw around with that crazy broad. And said, yeah, right, you're doing the wrong thing. No, I'm not. I believe that she thought that she was going to somehow make a windfall from this action, period. Now, again, let's get morbid and let's get realistic for a minute. Had I been in that position of having control of a major block of work from someone who just passed on, I'd call the printer up and say, print 5,000 copies more of all these books, because they're going to sell like hotcakes. Because for the same reason, there's no likelihood that there'll be any more made. It's my opinion that the widow is one of those people that basks in the reflected glory of others. And in her mistaken mind, she thought that she would just wrap all of this up for herself. Now, as it's now common knowledge, Gary's real will and last will and testament was found where it had been hidden, or after it had been hidden, and all of a sudden, no, the widow didn't get everything. And so in testing the market, there was a book put out from auction to see what kind of money it was going to bring, because both the siblings and I presume the widow have legal debts up the boo-hoo. Somewhere in the not that distant past, the widow filed trademarks on everything with Gygax in it, which is what caused the magazine to have to fold, because now the brothers couldn't use their own name. She owned it all. Well, the court has since found out that's not true. The manuscript, or the book that did come out, was meant to test the waters, because now the estate is, the siblings are trying to figure out how they're going to pay off the legal bills, because the widow doesn't have much of her own to get them to be collected from, to compensate them for their costs and expenses. That's why it was held back. A disturbed person had a very disturbed idea that somehow thought this would make her rich and famous for all the rest of her life. I believe that she got some really bad advice from a woman she knew who worked for a toy company. Nothing wrong with toy companies. It just, for the exception of Hasbro, nobody knows what to do with games. Especially the toy company that she's purported to have worked for. So anyway, that's what I know about it. And now, yes, it will be coming back out. I don't know what the Troll Lords and the siblings are cooking up for an agreement, but I'm sure that they are as eager to have their dad's stuff back out as Troll Lords is to try to recoup some of the enormous losses they incurred when the widow lost her mind. All my opinion. I'm headed to GaryCon in 2024. Will you be there? If I'm alive and capable, I will be there. If so, how many Wheel of Blame games do you run? Generally, 3 or 4. Depends on whether or not I run a different one. And this year I might not be running a night game on either Friday or Saturday so I can attend some of the parties that I never go to because I'm running games. And I figured I better start attending them pretty soon while I still can. You'd love to sign up. Well, then as soon as GaryCon comes open, there you go. Another question. I just recently read that Gary was a Jehovah's Witness. How much pushback from them did Gary receive when his game went public? Did he remain in the religion, leave, or get disfellowshipped? Lots of my family were witnesses back in the 80s, and I got lots of grief for playing. I knew that Gary was a witness. Whether or not he got pressured, I really am not sure. Mary kept attending the congregation, and I do know that there was a time when Gary had switched his allegiance to a much smaller, almost what I would call a more radical sect. And I mean no disrespect for that, but it's been my experience that the more names there are in the title of a church, the more to one degree or another they are extreme. And I think there were a couple, but I think in the end he went back to being a witness, I think. If his local group climbed on him about it, I was not aware of it. That was something that Gary didn't talk about with anybody else, to my knowledge, at least while I was there. Perhaps he and Brian had more discussions on it, but I never did. So I couldn't say whether he was thrown out, walked away, drifted away for a while. I don't know. Sorry. Okay. I got an empty seat at my table. For the last 35 years or so, I've been playing games, board games, miniatures, with a rotating number of the same people. And then one moves off, one drops out of gaming, another gets married. But I've had this core group of 4 other people and myself for many, many years, and we play every other Wednesday. And one of my dear friends of 35 years playing in friendship died Wednesday. And it's going to leave a big hole at the game table. Now, I'm not the first one to have a member of a gaming group, die. I am somewhat freaked out about the fact I talked to him Tuesday and he sounded fine, in great spirits, and Wednesday he was dead. Like I said, he's been a long-time friend. When he was, several years ago, when he was in rehab, I went and visited him several times a week. We'd play cards, just bullshit or whatever, keeping him company in the hospital. His wife's not able to. She has issues of her own. And the last thing I told him in our conversation was that if you need anything at all, you need only call. And he said, "Yep, I know that. Goodbye." So it's not going to be the same, and it's getting to the point where, well, Ron's dead, Chuck's dead, Hal went off other places, Tom got married and had kids, and besides which he lives way on the other side of town. And so the old group has shrunk down to 4 of us now. And I feel like we ought to buy a bottle of something for a in form of tontine or what tontine. And the last gamer gets to open a bottle and keep the dice or whatever. I don't know. But it's a shame that you don't always appreciate people as much as you could. Now, like I said, I took Ron to his chemo and therapy, radiation every Tuesday and stuff like that, so it wasn't like we were estranged by any means. But to sound great on Tuesday and die Wednesday morning just kind of stuns me. I'm more used to, more. I guess that's a blessing. Esophageal cancer. I don't think he knew he had it for more than 4 months. I don't know, maybe 3. Yeah, it'd be about 3 months ago when I started taking him to his, not even that, 2 months ago when I started taking him to his treatments. And he's gone, pew, just like that. Better than a long, horrible, lingering death and having to be fed in a tube. His wishes were no service, no memorial, no nothing, cremation, and a cousin is going to spread his ashes on a favored lake down in Tennessee in the spring. So the remaining 4 of us will get together on a upcoming Wednesday when we can, and we'll play a favorite game of his or whatever, and remember the good days we had with Ron, also known as the doggy. And on that morose note, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and Dodata Gqry. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gqry in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gqry, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.